Well, a major economic deal struck between the UK and the European Union is being hailed by both sides as a reset in the relationship. The deal that covers trade, defence and border control follows the first formal summit between the two jurisdictions since Brexit. Anand Menon is Director of UK in a Changing Europe and Professor of European Politics at King's College in London, and he joins me now. Professor Menon, good to have you with us this evening. Now, is this almost an informal, soft re-entry back into the EU, as is what Labour's opponents are suggesting, and might it also have been hastened by Donald Trump's trade war?
No on both counts. No, it's not a soft re-entry because this government has said quite clearly it has clear red lines. The UK is not about to rejoin the European Union. What they agreed yesterday, and in fact they agreed relatively little because the outcome of the summit was an agreement to negotiate loads of things. But insofar as they agreed anything, it was a sort of tinkering around the edges of the deal we currently have. And when it comes to Donald Trump, I think it's worth bearing in mind that one of the sort of key precepts of Keir Starmer's foreign policy is he will not choose between the EU and the US. So it absolutely isn't portrayed in the UK as a kind of reaction to Donald Trump. It's seen as a complement to our policies towards the United States.
There's a lot of economists are sort of hailing this as well. But so going to trade, which are the industries that might stand to benefit most? And so who are the big winners in this regard?
Okay, well, there are two real areas where the economics are important. The first is agriculture. The two sides have agreed to negotiate an agricultural deal. Now, when it comes to this won't be path-breaking in terms of the aggregate size of the UK economy, but it will make it easier to trade agri-food products, not only between Great Britain and the European Union, but also between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, where, if you remember, Brexit imposed a trade barrier within the United Kingdom. So it will ease trade. It might have an impact on food inflation. The government's talking about maybe £8 billion over the next few years, which is relatively small. The other area to watch, we have fewer details here, is the intention for the UK to be allowed into the EU single energy market. And over time, that might have an impact on energy prices.
So is it then fair to say that consumers, both, especially in the UK, won't really be seeing the benefits flowing into them in terms of lower prices?
I think there will be benefits. It'll be difficult for consumers to notice because, in a sense, the impact will be to prevent food price inflation if all the checks that the current situation necessitates were put in place. So I don't think we'll necessarily see food prices falling, but what we will see is no danger of food price inflation had the UK been forced to implement all the necessary controls on EU imports that the Trade and Cooperation Agreement says are necessary.
And is there any good news in this one for the movement of goods at the Northern Ireland border?
Yeah, there's good news around agriculture. And one of the major issues around the Northern Ireland border was agriculture. And this agreement, if they sign it, and they said they are determined to sign it, will make a massive difference to the Northern Ireland border and help smooth its operation quite significantly.
Now, we saw that there was the extension of an agreement to allow European vessels into UK waters. That's been sharply criticized, particularly by the right, as a horror show that would bring about the end of the fishing industry. What's your assessment of that ongoing fisheries deal?
I think there's probably three things worth saying about fisheries. Firstly, in terms of the economy as a whole, fisheries is absolutely trivial. I saw a study recently that said that the department store Harrods contributes more annually to the UK economy than the fishing industry. But fishing industry seats, constituencies, are very sensitive political ones. So the government is keen to do something for those constituencies. What we have in the deal is a continuation of the quotas that Boris Johnson negotiated. And the reason why the UK had to give a 12-year commitment to the European Union is quite simply because the UK was far keener on having the agriculture deal, the energy deal than the European Union. And so the European Union made the fisheries deal the price of negotiations on the things that the UK wants to make progress.
And how are the optics of this deal, for what it's worth, reflecting upon Prime Minister Keir Starmer by the general British public?
Well, like everything post-Brexit in the UK, there's two ways of looking at that. For the die-hard supporters of Brexit, this is a betrayal. So half of our newspapers were full of headlines about surrender and things like that. The other half of our newspapers hail this as a significant, practical, pragmatic step towards easing some of the trade barriers that have been placed there by Brexit. So we're a country polarized by Brexit. So you'll never get a single opinion in this country if it's anything to do with Brexit.
Yes, and just looking briefly into this defence as well, it would allow the UK access to the EU's defence loan programme to the tune of about 150 billion euros. How much of this aspect of the deal do you think had to do, with the war in Ukraine and increased Russian aggression?
It has to do with several things, partly the war in Ukraine, partly the perceived unreliability of President Trump, which has led Europeans to think we're going to have to start doing more for ourselves because we can't rely on the United States. What I would say, though, is not only is the SAFE program not fully signed off inside the European Union, but the terms of UK access to it are not signed off either. Now, both sides have said they're going to do it, so let's hope they do. But certainly, as a response to changing geopolitics, this strikes me as a very sensible step if they can get it over the line.
Okay, Professor Anand Menon, really grateful for your analysis today. Thank you very much.